Hello and welcome back to the Sweat Capital podcast. Today we are very lucky to be joined by Brad Pulford, HP Managing Director for ANZ. Thanks for joining us, Brad.
Great. Fantastic to be with you.
Thanks, Brad. So our first question for you, and a question I might ask all our guests, is what was your first ever job? As we find often a good story behind it or something you might have learnt. So we'll start there.
Great question. I mean, my first ever job was really working in internal sales. And what a way to start your journey, just in terms of understanding what customer experiences are all about, but also leaning into organizations and understanding what is required to really drive success and productivity. And so huge learnings as a youngster coming into a big corporate kind of, multinational at that point in time. And, certainly enjoyed the progress that I saw by making sure that I was committed on a daily basis, focusing on the outcomes of the organization and driving the metrics that were needed to, really drive success in the business.
Oh, wow. And so before we dive too deep into driving success in business, Brad, one thing that Will and I are both quite passionate about is our sport. We understand that you might have been a handy volleyballer and even wicket keeper at one point in your life. Can you shed some light on the early days as an athlete growing up in South Africa?
Putting me under pressure, Charlie. No, look, love my sport and certainly a big advocate for work-life balance. As a youngster, just, whatever ball sports I had access to, I would make sure that I leaned into, and loved my cricket and volleyball. You mentioned it, loved playing wicketkeeper. And in fact, any position where I could use my hands to be kind of, influential in any sport was fantastic. And so it was a pretty handy wicketkeeper, I would say, decent batsman, and certainly enjoyed my volleyball as well, being out in the sunshine, enjoying the beaches, which is always fantastic.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you can ask Will about how I...
It sounds like you're a lot better keeper than Charlie was.
Used
to shell stumpings and catches off my spit bowling all the time.
I'll have you...
Catches win matches.
Exactly. I'll have you know, Will actually lost his place as wicketkeeper in the school side to me. So
only because I started bowling incredible off spins.
All right.
There we go.
And so, do you want to take us through like what a university Brad Pulford was like? Like, what were you interested in, and then sort of how did you decide you wanted to go into that sort of like sales role quite early in your career? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, very early on, I was encouraged by my dad really to lean into technology, because at that point in time, it was becoming incredibly influential within the workplace. And, when you thought about where progress was, certainly from an economic point of view, technology was becoming incredibly important for every organization. And so I initially had, great thoughts of becoming some kind of lawyer or legal representative. And I was influenced again by my father rather to, get into technology.
Wow.
And so made that call, and really got into at the time was programming and networking was my two majors that I focused on. But during that process and that journey from an academic point of view, I realized that I just loved dealing and working with people. And so I think that's where the marketing and sales kind of interests came from. And so when given the opportunity to really become an internal sales representative at a young age, I kind of jumped at it. I never looked back. Love working with people. People are the core of essence of progress, and they're certainly the heartbeat of any organization. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah, wow. Because it would be pretty rare that you find too many young people with a correlation, with both the skill sets of, the technical programming and networking acumen, as well as the sales skills. Did you have a lean towards one or the other initially, or did both just come naturally to you?
No, look, there was definitely probably more of a leaning towards more people-centric type outcomes and sales and marketing. But that being said, I think it's so important to understand the foundation of what it is that you're interested in. And so programming, networking, infrastructure, core protocols from a technology point of view become critical. Yeah. If you're going to be a thought leader or a knowledge worker, it's incredibly important to understand the domain you're working in. So it was always good for me just to go and understand the principles of technology before leaning into a different career.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess like the landscape when you were joining that industry, like the electronics industry, has probably come a long way. It seems to evolve quite quickly, even like now. I mean, we look at things like AI and all the different new devices that are out there, like, Meta glasses, stuff like that. What was the industry like when you first joined it?
It was contrived in many respects and pretty archaic, frankly speaking.
Really?
When you think about networking today, just in terms of the progress that you've seen, it's incredibly different to when I entered, the technology kind of realms. And I remember working with coaxial cables and terminators and, with products like PowerLAN as an example, which certainly there's been a huge amount of progress around. So there's been, phenomenal transformation. And what I've seen is it just continues to accelerate every single year. And that's what's exciting. And I think the reason I've been in this industry for such a long time is because of that transformation and the opportunity to really make an impact in so many different areas.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point you make around the compounding effect of technological advancement, and then the flow through, to all the nodes within the industry. Can you sort of give us some context as to how you wound up initially in the electronics industry at Dell as sort of early in your career, and can you talk through those formative years within that business?
Yeah, look, the entry into Dell was very much about the unique proposition that Dell had at that point in time, which was really, about a direct model that they used to have, and that really intrigued me. And so entering that market was about learning new skills, that I could add to my armor, which was how do you deal with customers directly in order to create value and understand the outcomes that they're really looking for. And so that was the interest. And of course, once entering, the organization, it was really about a career path and adding value and contributing back to the organization in different roles, which is important. And I firmly believe you need to be building your development and your skill base on an annual basis. You need to be very intentional in terms of how you want to develop as an individual. That's how you drive progress. That's how you drive growth. So, wonderful journey, getting into the organization.
Yeah. And so do you keep like a record of what you want to get done in that year? Like, what are your goals for the year? And then do you sort of like give yourself like a report card as a year? Because I like the idea of like every year you go into, you want something out of it and then being intentional about it, because I feel like it's easy, especially I imagine in like the middle of your career, to just sort of bumble along and
Absolutely
not really get much out of it. So yeah, I'm intrigued as to how you sort of measure that. Yeah.
You have to be ambition-led, and ambition-led then drives goals and outcomes. And you've got to be able to start with the end in mind and then work backwards in terms of how you build that plan.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, I would encourage anyone that is on a career journey or a specific path to continue to challenge their outcomes on an annual basis. Really reflect on what progress you've made and make sure that you are delivering against your expectations, I think is critically important. And particularly when you're working in large organizations as well, because you can get lost in the realms of, all the nuances that big multinationals can bring, at scale. So very important that you continue to challenge yourself and continue to contribute back to the organization.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I guess part of sort of the annual check and review process at some point must have been the decision to join HP. Can you talk us through sort of that part of your life? Because I think from our research, it took place during what was a pretty interesting time for the world, in 2020.
Yeah, very interesting time. Just, coming at the back end of COVID, I would imagine, if I remember the timing correctly. So been with HP for 5 years now, and it was very specifically around being anchored and really impressed and motivated by, the strength of what HP has at the edge, everything that is end user compute. So really enjoyed the fact that you had a very comprehensive, innovative portfolio at the edge, driving the complete end user compute portfolio. Secondly, was the innovation at the edge that I really enjoyed. So some of the product centricity and helping drive some customer outcomes really intrigued me at that point in time. And then, of course, being, very anchored in terms of how we go to market. We lean into the channel. We make sure that we work incredibly closely with our partners in order to drive not only outcomes for our partners, but most certainly for customers ultimately as well. And that becomes a very important part of, of our culture and how we go to market. So was very impressed at that point in time. And I guess it would be remiss of me not to mention the phenomenal strength in culture that HP had. And I think when you think about transformation, and specifically the last decade, culture has had such a big influence in terms of how people feel about where they work and how they work. And so, that was a massive lever for me in terms of the decision-making process. So, phenomenal culture at HP.
Yeah, and we'll delve into the culture more a bit later. Just firstly, though, I guess the next sort of big move in your career was moving from South Africa back to Australia. Well, sorry, not back to Australia, but to Australia.
Yeah.
I guess, we all often hear about people sort of leaving Australia to go work overseas from the past guests we've had on the show. What was it like, coming to Australia? And you spoke about that culture piece there. Was that sort of culture the same in Australia too, that working culture?
Look, absolutely. You're always going to have cultural nuances, in every country, even Southern Hemisphere versus Northern Hemisphere. I mean, there were so many similarities that excited us in terms of coming to Australia out of South Africa. the sunshine, the beaches, the people, all those good things. Many sport, was a big one for us as well. So many kind of similarities, but of course you're going to have cultural nuances. But I think that's what keeps, development, ambition, work healthy. It's what motivates me. Most of my journey, I've worked in very diverse kind of environments and cultures. If you just think Africa as an example, 53 different countries, you think about what that means around cultural diversity and complexity. But at the same time, what excitement, what challenge, and what opportunity that brings, it just makes for a fantastic journey. So, coming into, a region like Australia, phenomenally mature, great knowledge, great education, certainly, very progressive in terms of how the tech landscape operates in Australia. So being very impressed in terms of how companies organize themselves and how they lean into the future from a planning point of view.
On HP's sort of work in understanding, our relationship with work, like Will and I are both workers in the economy. And so can you maybe shed some light on some of the work that you guys have done in recent times, the HP Work Relationship Index?
Yeah, look, it's so important coming out of what was COVID. And then generally, when you think about what has happened around transformation in hybrid working, we started to measure what is the work relationship index. So how are people feeling about their workplace and what does it mean? And how do we help transform that part of the industry? Because it becomes critically important because people are working differently today. And we want to make sure that we can continue to help people be productive in the workplace, but also drive outcomes, for the organizations that they represent. And so, we undertook, what has been a critical initiative for us to ensure that we align to what people need to drive progress within the work environment, whether that is large scale, mid scale, or even consumers, frankly, that, work from home. And so the reality has been a massive learning. So 12 different countries across different theaters that we really did survey, and across different parts of the organization as well. So not just knowledge workers, but certainly leaders as well, to try and make sure that we had a balanced view in terms of the feedback that we were given.
Yep.
And the insights that we've created have been, phenomenal, just in terms of giving a yardstick around how people are feeling about how they work, where they work, and what is important to them. And that has helped us ensure that we drive the right future of work strategy and that we build and create innovations that really help that progress in the future. And that's critically important for us.
Yeah, no, very interesting.
That's fascinating. So does HP run like a hybrid work model?
We do. We absolutely do. And I think, there's a lot of merit in terms of what is hybrid working today. And we're most certainly seeing the progress from a transformation productivity perspective in the workplace as well through hybrid models. It's been a good journey in that, we've seen a lot of change with regards to what hybrid means. Initially there was some misunderstanding that hybrid could translate to working from home only, being fully remote, but the name speaks for itself. It is truly hybrid. Being able to be productive, whether you're in the car, whether you're at home or in the office, becomes important, and hybrid for us is certainly the way forward.
Yeah, and logically, hybrid work would have a massive impact on the technology that employers are using to provide their staff with the ability to do that.
Absolutely.
So we might delve into sort of the nexus between technology and hybrid work a bit more here. Interestingly, you guys also look at it from a lens of happiness as well, which I find really quite exciting, to be honest, that you guys are even considering that. Unfortunately, according to your report, though, only 20% of knowledge workers have a healthy relationship work, which is down 8% on last year's numbers. Can you maybe give our listeners a little bit of an understanding of what might be driving this?
Look, Australians are working, I guess, harder than they ever have, frankly speaking. But yes, I think it boils down to whether they're getting the fulfillment within the workplace that they would need. And there are a couple of, in fact, there are 6 enablers that we've identified that really drive what we call fulfillment in the workplace that leads to that happiness.
Yeah.
And those 6 really play around collaboration. It's around technology or the tools that are being provided. It is around what is recognition in the workplace. It is about goal clarity, balance, and then focus and flow. So in other words, how are you operating within the workplace, both in terms of being productive and driving meaningful change versus doing admin-related tasks. Those are the 6 areas that we've identified that are critically important to drive fulfillment within the workplace, and also creates that balance between am I happy, am I not happy, within the workplace. So very, very important that we continue to make sure that from a leadership point of view going forward, that it goes beyond technology, and it is a number of different elements that we need to consider. within the workplace to make sure our employees and our workers are engaged.
Yeah, wow. Because like it's fascinating that, you know, you would think in developed markets like Australia we'd be, you know, pretty happy. Like, because I think in your report there's even a comparison between emerging markets where on the happiness indicator they largely outperform most of the developed markets, which you just wouldn't.
You wouldn't think that.
You wouldn't think that. Yeah. No.
So I guess what does Australia need to do to, you know, bump up its ranking? So I know we went from 2nd to 7th this year. So what do you reckon's like a couple of tangible things that Australia can try and do to really get boost that up?
Is it in the control of business owners?
Yeah.
It absolutely is in the control of business owners. And I think we've got to get more, and I use this word intentional all the time, but we've got to get more intentional around what that means. And the starting point is acknowledgement, right? And then you can start making progress. I'd call out a couple of things just in terms of the data that we have. So 14% of knowledge workers have a healthy relationship in work, with work at the moment. 14% is the latest data that we've just received. Australia is the second lowest globally currently in terms of the latest data that we have. And 13% decline year over year that we've seen, you know, which is certainly not progress, that's for sure. So that's alarming. 85% of what drives, to your point, Charlie, 85% of what drives fulfillment within the workplace is actually in the company's control. And so leaders really do have, you know, a big opportunity, but also responsibility to go and have a look at what is driving this. And it starts with acknowledgement. And there are 3 areas that I would encourage. The one is around recognition. The next one is around purpose, but very importantly, to have the right tools to be very effective across that spectrum. That becomes critical. And so what we're trying to, you know, achieve from an HP point of view is really build solutions that help people work smarter, help them connect within the workplace and be creative, because that's when work truly doesn't feel like work, and that becomes important.
Yeah. And why does it, so for a business owner sitting here, you know, listening to this, why does it matter? Like, why, like, you know, obviously your staff being happy is important, but like, why should that matter to me?
Because you want a workforce that is engaged, that is living and breathing and building the brand, and that is being completely productive in the organization. When you have the right tools and when you have a great workforce, a engaged workforce, what you're seeing is an elevated productivity within the organization, and you're seeing more success, you know, in terms of growth. That becomes, you know, critically important for every organization. So, you know, very, very important.
Yeah, it's no surprise we have these discussions at a sort of national level around declining productivity when everyone's unhappy. There you go.
Good correlation there, yeah. And I guess so, as you know, the leader of HP in the Australia New Zealand region, you said that, you know, 85% of the control is within the hands of the leaders. I guess how does that make you feel in terms of like trying to,
yeah,
you know, do you like feel the pressure on trying to boost that up in your own organization? Yeah,
absolutely. You know, I think it's again, the starting point is making sure that you identify those areas that are going to help people feel, you know, more engaged in the workplace and have a good relationship. And coming back to those 6 enablers I spoke about, it's important that you find that balance. And, you know, there are a couple of things that are incredibly important. Collaboration in a workplace is going to help define and drive a brand. You know, it's going to also foster the right kind of engagement in terms of connection within the workplace. Having technology and the right technology that is consistent in a hybrid workforce is critically important. If you're working from home, you want the same experience as what you have when you're working from the office. Otherwise, how can you be consistently productive in, you know, your experience, you know, across the workplace itself? I often find there are a few levers that we should be doing as leaders. And I think it is alarming to me to see certain areas being called out, recognition being one of them. People want to be recognized. People want goal clarity in the jobs that they do on a daily basis. They want to understand that they, you know, that they have an outcome that they are working towards. They also want balance, and balance not in terms of just work-life balance, but balance in terms of what is it of my function that is internal and administrative versus how am I driving productivity and gains for the company? How am I being influential in the workplace? So all these elements become, incredibly important. And so as a leader in HP, yes, I think policy has become very important. I would call that out as something that typically lacks in many organizations, is not having a robust hybrid policy. Making sure we have that policy, the back to work kind of policy, making sure that we have the right tools, the right technology, and the right balance from a leadership point of view is very, very important for us.
Yeah, no, interesting. And so on that topic of technology, like within organizations, how are you seeing different generations and profiles of workers adapt to this. I think in reading the report, there was one stat that just blew my mind away, being that the boomers are adopting AI at a higher growth rate than any other generation in recent times, which, to be honest, thinking about it, the amount of times Will's uncle, we went and met him recently, and he's, as I said, speaking into Chat GPT every 5 seconds, seeking clarity on things.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing?
To his wife, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you seeing from like a generational standpoint?
Yeah, it's very interesting. There are certain nuances that have come to the fore that I guess aren't that surprising, to be honest. But with the acceleration of AI within the workplace, we are seeing the boomers kind of lead the charge and adopt AI very specifically. And I think for very obvious reasons. Boomers these days are very comfortable from a technology point of view. And so they lean into it. It's part of their daily lives, frankly speaking. And I think as you go up the age stack, I think that becomes less so. It becomes more of possibly a threat rather than a teammate type approach, in terms of how you're operating with that tool. So that's certainly something that we are seeing. The other thing that we've seen from an AI adoption perspective, which is actually very interesting, is that for the first time, we're seeing the consumers not adopt a certain piece of technology first, but rather the enterprise part of the business. So that is a nuance that we picked up, is that enterprise seem to be leading the charge from an adoption point of view rather than just consumers. Normally, it's the other way around. When you have early adopters, when there is innovation or technology advancement within the industry. So a few interesting things happening there.
Oh, very interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. And then I guess, is there any correlation between like the use of AI and that happiness index that you guys track?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess AI falls under the technology tools piece. Having the right tools to really make an impact within the business, I think, becomes critical. We often talk about AI being a partner for leaders to drive the future of work, which becomes incredibly important. And the future of work is really about creating experiences that can drive growth for people, for companies, in a way that allows us to define solutions that help work not feel like work. And it's about having access to great tech in terms of mobility. It's allowing you to be productive on the move. It's allowing you to have an experience that is seamless, great video, great voice capability, great devices, whether you're printing, whether you are annotating, whether you are on the move talking, that experience needs to be seamless. And so that really creates an elevated level of, productivity within the work environment as well.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And even in terms of not the direct work environment, but some of the side hustles, I think that the report mentions around, Gen Zs these days, and probably partly to do with some of the macro factors that we spoke about around cost of living and those things, are able to have little side hustles largely enabled by some of the tools that are available.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly that. I think the adoption of AI and being able to be more creative within the workplace allows you to be more flexible as well and create those opportunities for yourselves. I think certainly AI is helping drive that. There's also, one of the bits of feedback that have come is, those individuals that have access to the right tools as well as AI are 5 times more likely to be productive, to certainly make progress in their own personal and, job capacities, but also to have a great relationship with work as well. So very, very important that we're providing that access.
No, fantastic.
Okay. I guess to round out our discussions, Charlie, I'd like to ask some more general advice questions towards the end. So I guess the first one would be, in the context of HP, what do you look for when you're looking to hire someone? What makes a great worker at HP?
It's a great question. Look, we look for people that are progressive, that have, a very connected outlook in terms of what they're trying to achieve, somebody that is ambition-led, somebody that is leaning into what technology means for the future. I think that's critical. Somebody that has a fantastic culture fit for the organization, which, is very, very important for us. Somebody that wants to make an impact in the organization. These are levers that, I think are critically important moving forward for success for any organization. We're certainly looking for diversity, and we're looking for people that can be creative as well. All those elements make for, the future of work, which is very important for us. And the future of work for us is really around being purpose-led. It's about being creative and agile, and it's about leveraging AI for the future. So being able to leverage the right tools to make progress. And it's interesting because when you look at data, pure data, 77% of Australians today are leveraging and using AI.
Wow.
Only 31% of them are using it on a daily basis, but that's 18% up year over year. So that's quite interesting. There's certainly progress. AI is becoming more meaningful in the workplace. 55% of workers today basically believe that technology is helping them with their work-life balance. So that's very, very important because you do want to strike the balance between both those worlds. And 66% of workers today basically say that technology is going to have a massive impact on their outcomes, their productivity and success over the next couple of years. So we look for people that are leaning into some of those elements and have a very, ambitious outlook for the future.
Yeah, fantastic. And to round out the discussion, Brad, and this is, no notice for this question either. So if you had one piece of advice for a young worker, Brad Pulford, what would it be?
I'm going to give you two.
Please.
What a great response. That's
Unprepared, but gives us two. That's good.
puts it back on us.
No, I mean, my advice would be, number one, be curious, because there's so much transformation and change happening in the world today that without curiosity, you're probably not learning. So be curious, have a willingness to learn, always be learning is incredibly important. And the second one is lean into courage. Embrace being courageous when you're thinking about making decisions about your career, about choices, about how you operate on a daily basis. Those areas have certainly helped me in some of the decision making that I've had to make in my career and have kept me focused and anchored in terms of some of the decisions and I guess career journey profiling that I've wanted to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad, for giving us your time and insights today. I think it's pretty privileged for us to be able to sit here and get the insights of someone who's leading Australia in a company that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much, Brad. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chai. Thanks, Will. And look, great to see the HP devices
Yeah.
showed up with.
Let's get them out for you. Just borrow this one from JB Hi-Fi just for today.
Fantastic. There is one in the airport, right?
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, gents.